Elizabeth.
And I'm Vivian.
And welcome to the Entry Level Adulting Podcast,
where we help you to navigate the confusing world of adulting,
one challenge at a time.
Welcome, friend.
Hello, and welcome to the Entry Level Adulting Podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth, and I am joined today by my beautiful co-host, Vivian.
Hello, y'all.
Hey. So today, I think we're going to be talking about diet, correct?
Yeah. No one likes diets.
No. As you can see, we're both real thrilled.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be on a diet, actually. The funny part, complete segue kind of into this. Diet just actually means what you eat. So when we're talking about diets, we're literally just talking about what you eat. So you already eat, I hope.
I do too.
So
no, that's a good point though, because I mean, we are definitely not sponsored by any sort of diet plan by any means, or we're not going to be pushing any diet plans onto you.
Nope.
I think we just really want to talk about your food health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you're already eating. You're eating every day, so you're on a diet.
I think the word diet has a lot of very negative connotations for people because they think it's limiting. Like immediately for me, I think if I hear diet, I'm like, oh, I'm not allowed to eat something.
Mm-hmm.
And that already puts me in a bad mood or puts me off.
Because you think of your favorite things are. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not giving that up. I can't give that up.
It's not right.
It's not. I want to eat it. But, you know, like the 4-year-old in me comes out and it's like, but it's good. You know, they put stuff. Anyway, you could go into a whole thing about the American food industry, but
yeah. So maybe we'll phrase it as we're going to talk about your nutrition.
That's I like that. Yes, fitness and nutrition are much better words than diet and exercise. Like someone fight me on that.
They mean the same things though, y'all. So just bear that in mind.
Shh, don't ruin it. No. But it's true. So let's talk about nutrition then. Let's talk about it because honestly, for me, working out and taking care of your physical body is, you know, a challenge of its own. I'm sure we'll talk about that in another podcast. But I feel like half of actually getting results from what I've heard and seen for myself is mostly your diet.
It really is. Like, it sucks. Diet and exercise are important. It is hard to separate the two. You need, use everyone's least favorite words. Nutrition and fitness.
Nutrition and the politically correct now.
But they are, right, important for being able to maintain a healthier overall body, right? And the reason why, and there is this really big study that was done that I won't go into the weeds to, and I'll probably put the link at some point up for you guys if you really want to read the study, looked at 3 different diets, right? And it took into account macros. So for people who don't know what macros are, it's macronutrients, which the class of them is carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So basically, whenever your body breaks something down, it usually falls into one of these 3 categories in terms of what's absorbed. Everything that's not absorbed is fiber, so that stuff doesn't even count. But those are the 3 major groups, right?
Also, if you have a Fitbit, those are also the 3 major groups.
That's why
I'm sitting here and I'm like, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I had a Fitbit.
Yeah. And what they found, right? I know there's like a lot of push in terms of fads, like, ooh, what are your macros? Looking at this, looking at that. And they found, so they did like different percentages of all 3 macros, right? So they had one that was more like, I don't want to say maybe so more heavy leaning towards carbohydrates, right? Another one more heavily leans towards proteins. Another one more heavily leans towards like fats. And there's different variations of all 3 groups. But what they did is they gave everyone about the same caloric intake for all 3 groups. And they found that there was no difference really in terms of weight loss between the 3 groups.
Really?
Yeah.
I would not have expected that, to be honest.
I didn't either.
I'm personally shocked.
Yeah. Now, there became like some differences in terms of how some people felt, right? Being on them, like if they felt better, right? So, I mean, if you're not eating lots of vegetables, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but they didn't feel as great. But in terms of being able to lose weight, it was relatively the same pound per pound for each group. So that was beneficial.
That's so interesting because I've noticed that there's different sorts of people as far as like what sorts of foods you like. Obviously, no doubt, Elizabeth. In the sense of like some people really like meat, some people really like bread, some people really like, really do genuinely enjoy like their fruits and vegetables. But personally, I think people besides junk food and stuff like that, I do think people tend to gravitate towards food that makes them feel good, right? For
Right.
whatever reason. And so if you're not a big meat person, you probably don't eat a lot of meat, i.e. meat. If you're a big meat person, then you probably do eat a lot of meat, i.e. someone.
Yeah, I ate a lot of meat. I like my carne.
Right. And so I think there's a certain amount of preference that comes into play, but I also personally think it might just be what your body likes.
Right. Like there are certain foods, right, that anything that's really rich in like calorically dense food, so that's junk food, your body likes goes, yay, energy, right? Like you're starving. And while there are people that are, and I don't want to downplay the seriousness of starvation, here in America, right, the majority of people are not. And we are eating diets, eating foods that we do not expend that amount of caloric energy per day to warrant eating those amounts of calories, right? And that's why we have this huge, while we are in a pandemic right now, right, there is an epidemic in America. Epidemic means a situation that's affecting not on a global scale of, right, obesity and being overweight. And while I'm not like trying to body shame anyone, there are like health ramifications to all that excess weight on your joints, on your bones, on your heart, right? So I want to target this because I'm noticing that the trend, right, and we've been noticing for a while, isn't just in adults, but now it's also in children, and the long-term ramifications that's going to have on their health and their life expectancy. So I feel like addressing it and developing good habits while we're young to be able to bring into future families or pre-existing families is really important for the benefit of everyone else too.
No, 100%. And I don't know if anyone else is like me and saw the Super Size Me movie, but it's kind of that discussion of yes, you have autonomy to choose what you eat. And no, we're not talking about sort of the economic problems of yes, it's more expensive to buy healthy food. Like that's a whole other issue that needs to be addressed. But you can make healthy choices with the choices that you do have and try to, again, everything in moderation, right? Because who doesn't like certain junk foods, right? Like I crave them sometimes. No shame. They're like specially formulated and designed to do so. But it doesn't mean you have to eat it every day. It doesn't mean that you have to eat a lot of it, even if you do eat it every day. It's about having the moderation and understanding your personal portion sizes, which sort of goes into understanding, what your body frame is, how much you should be eating as an individual, because, we're both short women. We're not going to have the same caloric intake as a guy who's 6'5".
Oh my God. If I had to have like a 3,000 calorie diet, I'd be great. If that was like okay and maintain the like weight and like health that I want, I'd be straight, no problems.
I like cannot physically consume that much food. Genuinely, I think my stomach would.
I think I can, but I shouldn't.
I would throw it up. Honestly, I can't do it. But I follow like Dwayne Johnson on Instagram and I see, The Rock's cheat meals and they're like the most enormous banana pancakes I've ever seen. And I just deep down know that I will never be there. Okay. Like it's never going to happen for me. And that's okay. I'm not going to be the hot dog eating champion, even though I love corn dogs. That's my guilty pleasure food personally. But it's you have to understand where your personal caloric intake should be as far as your frame, as far as your goal weights, because if you do want to lose weight, eating at a caloric deficit is a very surefire way to do that.
It's an easy way to do it, right? Some of the things to look out for from a healthcare standpoint is making sure that you're still getting all the nutrients that you should be getting, right? So making sure that you're still getting, if even if you're not eating meat, that you're getting enough protein, that you're getting enough of your vitamins and iron and fiber, right? The reason why is because deficits in these categories can cause increased fatigue and irritability, which you're already kind of doing something you don't want, and now it's making you tired and sleepy and cranky, and then a little bit low key, you're still hungry. Um, no, that's the other thing I want to talk about. You should not be hungry when you change your diet, because then there's an issue. That means that you are not having enough to sustain you for where you want to be. And I feel like the biggest thing that I notice people do is that they go on like some fad diet and they're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna do this," and then they're hungry. I'm like, why am I hungry? And then they stop that diet, and then they go back to how they were eating before, and they end up eating more than they did before because they're like, I'm free. And then they end up gaining all the stuff that they lost. And they're like, what happened? You did not approach this from a maintainable standpoint, and that's the biggest thing. You want something that is going to be easy for you to maintain.
That's a great point. Like, say it louder for the people in the back. You should not be hungry. We are not advocating for you to starve yourself, okay? That is called anorexia, and that's like a mental illness, genuinely. Like, people really struggle with that, and that is not something that we take lightly, and that's not something that we recommend. What we're saying is that you naturally spend calories just by existing, which is kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. You should work out and also, spend more calories that way. But you also just like spend a normal daily amount of calories just by living your life. And so if you eat a certain amount of calories that is slightly less than that, you will lose weight. And so the goal is to, one, figure out how many calories you typically eat in a day. And then I think instead of limiting what you eat, you can do that. I like to think of it as replacing. So, like Vivian said, you shouldn't be hungry. So, instead of eating something that's not going to fill you up as much, you could substitute it for something that is slightly healthier, less calories, but will still fill you. So, like for me, what I think of is like for breakfast, I tend to eat like more eggs at breakfast as opposed to like a piece of toast, because the egg is going to keep me fuller for longer and it has less calories. When the egg has less calories, then I feel like I'm still eating, I'm still getting meals in, but instead of feeling like I can't have something, I'm just replacing it with something else that's healthier. So for me, I'm just making a healthier choice as opposed to being like, I'm not allowed to eat anything at all. And also, something to touch on is figuring out what times of day you're hungry. So for me, I've sort of naturally been intermittent fasting my entire life because I don't get hungry until about 2 hours after I wake up. That's just how I've always been. Not everybody's like that. My mom and my brother are people that are like, I must eat as soon as I leave my bed. I am so hungry. So,
Yep.
and that's what's true for them.
Nothing's worse than being up and being hungry. You feel like insulted. You're like, what have you been doing all night? We've been laying down. Why are you hungry?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So you have to understand what your body's natural clock is. Like for me, I'm not hungry at breakfast time and I do all of my eating pretty much from like 12 to, dinner. And so that's just how I've naturally always been. And what's great about that in intermittent fasting is it helps limit snacking by ending your eating early, because a lot of times the late night snacking is how like your nutrition fails you because your impulse control is not as strong at that point, I think.
So I do want to touch on intermittent fasting since you brought it up. It's this hot. This is the new hot, like sexy version of like, ooh, a diet. There was like the South Beach, and then there was the Mediterranean. Ooh, then it was keto. Now it's intermittent fasting. Whatever, right? The reason why it works is because, like we were talking about before, it essentially causes you to reduce your caloric intake because you spend less hours in the day eating. That is the benefit. So, you can also reduce your calories, right, by counting them. You can do it by making sure that you're eating things that you already know are low calorie as opposed to high calorie, like, switching soda for water. That's an easy one. But that's the reason why intermittent fasting can work for some people. Now, If you're like, oh, I'm going to intermittent fast and I only eat between like 9 to 7 p.m. and all you did was eat 10 packs of Oreos, you are not going to lose weight like that unless you were eating 20 packs beforehand and this is a significant decrease for you. Fine, yes, that will work. But my point is that it works because you are essentially reducing the amount of calories that you're consuming within a day. The other thing I want to touch on that I know some people have a hard time with is obsessing about the amount of calorie counting that they're doing. And a lot of people struggle with wanting to calorie count. I don't like calorie counting. I don't want to keep track. I just want easy ways to remember that I reduce my calories. So, one of the things that I do personally is like in the morning, I will have a protein shake. Is it my favorite meal? No. But can I drink it on the way to work? Yes. And that saves me 5 minutes so I can sleep in bed more. But I automatically know that this is reducing my caloric deficit versus like a croissant with toast. Oh, that's a lot of bread. A croissant with bacon or something or egg, right? Versus the protein shake. I know that I'm getting a decent amount of protein. For the most part, it already has like vitamins and minerals in it, so that's beneficial also. So I'm not just eating nothing. But I know I have significantly dropped my caloric intake by at least 300 calories. There's small things that you can make adjustments to aside from just counting calories or saying that I'm only going to eat between this time and this time, right? You can just, like Elizabeth was saying, replace some of the things that you're doing with options that you know that you either enjoy or are easier for you to do, but automatically lower the amount of calories that you're having without having to expend too much mental energy and obsessing about the numbers and be like, well, I can't have this because it's this, da 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 da.
For me, it was exciting because I started to become more aware of what I was eating. And then I was able to make an informed decision of, if I'm going to have dessert today or chips or whatever, something that I probably shouldn't be having, I not only understand portion sizing a little bit better, but it comes back to the moderation. Like, I feel no guilt in eating this right now because I know I have taken care of myself every other part of the day. And this is like a kind of reward, you know?
Yeah. But that's what it should be. It shouldn't be this thing where you're like, it's more of an awareness about what you're putting into your body, right? We have like awareness about the clothes that we buy, right? Or the types of like food, oh, it has to be organic, da da da, whatever, all that stuff, right? But the same thing goes into what you're like physically consuming, right? In terms of the benefit and how it's making you feel. I am not pushing one diet over another. Most diets, right, that are become fad diets all have that danger of not being able to sustain it. But this mindfulness about what you're eating and how much you're eating and why you're eating certain things can be really beneficial in terms of the long-term benefit, right? So I have been on this particular diet now for 2 years. So the sustainability of it has been really good for me. The benefits in terms of, like my weight loss have been good. I've been able to maintain a certain amount of weight loss, right? Do I still have goals and things that I want to achieve? Yes. But I want to also stress that none of this happens overnight and that none of it is a week or a month or even a 3 month long process for most people, depending on their goals. This is a lifetime achievement. This is something that you're moving towards for your entire lifetime, is having this mindfulness about what you're eating and why you're eating certain foods.
I completely agree. What I was able to do during the pandemic is I was able to have more control over what I was eating because I was cooking and preparing it more myself. Same for me in college, I would typically eat out for, on campus for a meal a day or something like that when I was in classes or something, grabbing something quickly. And so that gave me less autonomy over what I was eating as far as what was going in it and preparing it. And that's why eating out sometimes people don't realize how many calories are involved and added to those things. Whereas if you make it yourself, it won't have as many added calories, sort of like with salt or things like that. Uh, I think when you cook for yourself as well, or you have meal prep meals or something, basically when you just have more awareness of what is being put into the food that you're eating as well and how it's being prepared, also gives you a much better um, opportunity to make more informed decisions.
No, I agree. Part of the reason why like cooking for yourself is so much healthier, right, is because you one usually don't add as much sodium into the food as opposed to pre-prepared food or processed food, right? Processed anything in a bag, y'all. Okay, I don't mean the vegetables. There's a bag of oranges, you're fine. But um, canned processed, yeah, there's a lot more sodium in there that you think. And I'm not saying that, oh, don't buy any of those things. I get it. It's super convenient. You work a long day. No one really wants to have to sit down and cook a 5 course meal. But just looking at what you're having and what's actually in it and like kind of just putting in front of your mind, oh, okay, this is what's in this. I kind of already know, right, that this probably isn't the best for me to eat. They have the nutrition labels on the back of packages. Really look, right? Sometimes like on the front of bags, they're starting to be better about putting it. They're like, oh, like 200 calories. You're like, this is great. The whole bag, and you look and it's like 2 pieces. And you're like, okay, I for sure had 20. What do you mean two?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to touch on is I don't think people always understands how to read a nutrition label properly and what it all means from a medical perspective as well as just from an informed perspective, genuinely. And so what Vivian's talking about is the portion sizes. It's at the very top of a nutrition label and it tells you approximately how many
Yes, the serving
portions that
size.
bag, the serving size, thank you, yes, are in there. And so all the following numbers are for one serving. And so if you're eating a bag that has 4 servings in it, then you need to multiply everything by 4 on the rest of that nutrition label. And so being aware of that and looking at those portion sizes is really important because you might be eating more than you realize.
Without eating like this small little thing. And that's like the reason, right? There are nutrients that they're foods that are nutrient dense and nutrient poor, right? And a lot more of the processed foods tends to fall into nutrient poor. The reason why we call them nutrient poor is because for such a small amount of food, there's so many calories that and you don't feel full afterwards. The amount that you'd have to eat to feel sated is ridiculous. And that's why it's nutrient poor. It's not beneficial for you. A nutrient dense food is something that you can eat enough that you're full and it be able to supply your caloric and energy needs without causing you to have to eat an exorbitant amount of the food.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do you have any rules of thumb when you look at nutrition labels as far as being able to recognize if something is likely nutrient poor or nutrient rich?
Yeah. Well, I look at the serving size, right, for starters, to figure out how much that is. And if you don't know, and it's hard to do in the store, you already have canned and labeled food in your house. And you probably, I hope, have a measuring cup of some sort. Okay. And what you can do is it's easiest with like a solid, like if you have rice, but you can also use just water, right? And if they're like, okay, 3/4 cup is 100 calories, right? And you're like, I do not know what 3/4 cup looks like. Measure it out and look at it and say, okay, am I gonna be full with this? So when they're like 2 pieces, right? And you put the 2 pieces down and you think about the number and it's like 200 calories. Think about how much you eat so that way you have like a physical representation of the calorie size. And it then becomes easier. Like 200 calories, how is 200 calories? Only one piece. I no, right? And that kind of help you make more informed decisions about the food you're buying.
I just want to say a great example of that is like with cereal. If you measure out or portion out like how much cereal you want to eat and it's like 3/4 a cup, is that enough cereal for you?
And I want to start also with if you're going to start looking more heavily at your calories and you're like, oh, I'm going to reduce them. Don't just start reducing your calories without even knowing how much you eat. Okay. Look to see what you're eating first and saying, okay, where can I make adjustments from there? Because then you're just not taking away things. You can just make adjustments. But back to the food level, the next thing that I look at is sodium. The reason why is sodium can cause excess in sodium can cause you to retain water or fluid, which can give you a bloated feeling, bloated look, whatever, and can cause issues with blood pressure. So looking at that, the next thing that I look at is also trans fat and the amount of saturated fat. The reason why trans fat is a fat that is solid at room temperature, right? And the reason why you look at that and it's important is because the amount of trans fat that you ingest is more likely to have issues for your body clearing. So that fat can start to line important things like your blood vessels, like the lining of your heart, the lining of your organs, right? So making sure that your food doesn't have tons of that. And then also looking at the amount of carbohydrates or sugar that it has. And if you've never done it in school, you should measure out the amount of sugar in like your most favorite food at least once per the serving size. And then think about how much you eat and how much that looks like.
Yeah, it's a little horrifying. So for sodium and sugars and fats and carbs, are there certain ranges that you would typically recommend staying within? Like how do you know how much is like a lot of sodium? Like how do you know how much that is? Like is there a daily percentage value or something like that that would
There
let you know?
is, right? You can measure out by like grams, but we don't really use grams in America. So the biggest thing I'd say is looking at like the daily serving size on a can, right? If it says 100% of your daily sodium intake, you have to think about that you are not eating any more salt for the rest of the day with that one food. So using that as a gauge could help a little bit more.
Yeah. I typically, if it's over 20%, then that I have to think about that one, because then that means that's like a fifth of the day. And if I have a lot of other meals to eat that day, then, I might have to rethink what I'm eating.
Right. So that's like an easier way to just look at it and be like, okay, use the percentage. The things that you do not really want in your diet at all is trans fat. That's like the biggest no-no. It's not good for your long-term heart health. I'm not saying you can't have any, just not lots, right? We found that it's really not beneficial for your heart. So that's one of the biggest things I'd to say avoid in canned foods specifically. The other one with like the vitamins and the minerals, when people are like, ooh, look, it has extra vitamin C or vitamin E, whatever it is. For the most part, you already get that in your diet. Americans, while aren't like the best in terms of being like overall healthy, right? The foods that we have access to generally are fortified a lot with the amount of vitamins we need in a day. And we actually end up peeing out a lot of the excess. There's this running joke that Americans have the most expensive urine in the world because we take so many vitamins. Oh my gosh, I have all this vitamin C. I must be so healthy. Your urine is full of vitamin C. That's what you do with the extra. We don't store it up for later for the most part. Once your stores are full, you pee it out. So if you're getting more than 100% for the most part of what you need, which also accounts for replenishing your stores in your body, you're just pissing it out, okay?
So basically, don't put as much stock in that part.
Right. So if that's like what's been making you eat this certain thing, you're like, but it's so healthy. Look at all these vitamins. I need all these. And if you're already getting them, over 100%.
Basically, if you really want that, take a multivitamin.
Right.
I take gummies because that way I'll actually eat them because I'm a child. But, if you're honestly worried about your vitamin intake, a really easy way to do that is just get some vitamins.
Yep. And all the extra you'll pee out.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add as far as diet goes? Or, I'm sorry, nutrition?
As far as nutrition goes, I think the same thing, like with anything that we're talking about, is to be kind to yourself. I feel like we're always meaner to ourselves, and realistically look at what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. And then also looking at why you want to achieve these things, because you want something that ultimately you're going to be able to maintain and sustain for a long period of time. We don't want to introduce fads. We want to make healthy habit choices for ourselves to help improve our quality of life.
Bye, friend.
Bye. And that's our show for today.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on our next podcast.
We hope you continue to face adulthood head on. We've got this.
Follow us at Entry Level Adulting on Instagram, intro and outro music by @Diku_ on Twitch.
Bye, friend.